and you have spent years wondering whether this makes you extraordinary or damaged, whether the depth of what you feel is a gift or a burden you somehow attracted through your own unresolved wounds, whether the exhaustion that follows intense social contact is sensitivity or weakness, whether the solitude you increasingly crave is wisdom or avoidance. The answer is not what most people will tell you, and it will not arrive in a comfortable package. Because genuine awakening, the specific and irreversible expansion of consciousness that the empath undergoes when they stop suppressing what they actually are, is not a pleasant process. It is not the smooth, upward, consistently improving journey that spiritual content tends to describe. It is disorienting. It is isolating. It dismantles things you thought were stable before it reveals what was always beneath them. But it is also the most important thing that has ever happened to you. And the 5 signs that follow are not a flattering label to adopt. They are the accurate description of a transformation already in progress, whether you are ready for it or not. The first sign that you are an awakening empath is that your sensitivity, always present, always significant, has recently become something you can no longer contain within the management strategies that previously kept it functional. This is not a regression, Scion. It is a threshold. Before the awakening, the sensitivity was there, but it was manageable. You had developed through long practice and considerable unconscious effort a set of strategies for navigating a world calibrated for a different level of perception than yours. The selective numbness, the social performance, the specific habituated way of being present enough to function without being present enough to be overwhelmed. You were not fully inhabiting your perception, you were managing it. And the management worked at a cost. You did not fully calculate well enough to maintain the appearance of ordinary functioning. Then something shifted. The management stopped working with its previous efficiency. The sensitivity began breaking through the containment. Environments that were previously navigable became genuinely difficult. Relationships that were previously manageable became physically costly. The emotional data coming through your system increased in volume and specificity. Efficity until the strategies that once kept it contained were simply inadequate. This is not a sign that something is wrong with your nervous system. It is a sign that your nervous system is refusing to continue suppressing what it actually perceives. The awakening begins with the body's refusal to maintain the suppression, the specific, involuntary, impossible to override insistence of a consciousness that has outgrown the container the management strategies built. Here is the brutal truth about this sign. The discomfort is proportional to how long and how thoroughly the suppression was maintained. The more successfully you managed your sensitivity before the awakening, the more disorienting its emergence through the management will feel. Because you are not just experiencing the sensitivity now, you are experiencing it, plus the backlog of everything the management was successfully containing. Your sensitivity did not suddenly become too much. You simply stopped being able to pretend. It was less than it is. That stopping, however uncomfortable, is the beginning of something genuine. The second sign is precise and physical. Inauthenticity in conversations, in relationships, in environments built on collective agreements to maintain comfortable surfaces, has begun producing a specific somatic response in your body that was not present, or not as acute, before the awakening began. You walk into a space where the performance is operating, where people are presenting managed versions of themselves and engaging with each other's managed versions, without anyone acknowledging the gap between presentation and reality, and your body responds. A tightening, a restlessness, the specific physical signal of a nervous system that is registering the inauthenticity as a kind of environmental toxin and communicating its assessment through sensation before your conscious mind has processed a single word. This response is not social anxiety. Social anxiety is the fear of being, judged by others, What you are experiencing is categorically different. It is your own authentic nature refusing to be present in spaces that require its suppression. The awakening empath's nervous system develops an increasingly precise instrument for distinguishing between genuine contact and its performance. And the distinction, once it becomes fully conscious, makes the performance increasingly intolerable, not as a moral judgment, but as a physiological reality. The body simply will not pretend anymore that the surface exchange is the same thing as genuine meeting. Here is the mindset shift this sign produces when it is understood clearly. Your intolerance for inauthenticity is not a social limitation to be corrected. It is a calibration instrument becoming more precise. The discomfort it produces is directional information pointing you away from what cannot nourish you and toward what can. Trust the direction. The third sign is quieter, more interior, and more frequently is read than any of the others. Your solitude has changed quality. Before the awakening, solitude was recovery, the necessary restoration of a system depleted by the continuous cost of navigating a world calibrated for less sensitivity. You needed it, you sought it, but it carried a specific undertone, the loneliness of someone who was alone because they had to be, who was resting from the world rather than genuinely inhabiting themselves within it. The awakening changes this, not immediately, not without the disorienting transition period of someone who is losing the familiar relationship with their solitude before the new one has fully arrived, but genuinely, over time, with the specific non-linear rhythm of something that is building rather than being built. The solitude stops being recovery and begins being home, not the home of someone who has given up on connection, the home of someone who has developed, through the consistent practice of genuine interior contact, a relationship with their own consciousness that is substantive enough to be genuinely nourishing rather than simply preferable to the alternative. You begin to find, in the quiet, something you cannot find in most of the noise. The actual texture of your own experience, unfiltered, unmanaged, neither performed for anyone nor modified in anticipation of anyone's response. Just the direct, immediate, entirely genuine reality of your own interior. That direct contact with your own interior, that specific, cultivated, genuinely inhabited solitude is not loneliness. It is the most honest relationship available to a human being. And the awakening empath is one of the few who develops the capacity to sustain it. The fourth sign is disorienting until it is understood. Your relationship with time is changing in ways that do not fit any of the framework's productivity, efficiency, the cultural imperative of constant forward motion that previously organized how you moved through your days. You are Biko, being less tolerant of how you spend your time. Not in the strategic sense of someone optimizing their schedule for better outcomes, in the deeper, more interior sense of someone whose consciousness is becoming increasingly aware of time as the actual substance of their life, the specific, irreplaceable, entirely non-renewable resource that is being spent in every moment, the quality of whose spending determines the quality of the life being lived. The awakening empath develops a growing, sometimes uncomfortable sensitivity to the gap between time spent in genuine aliveness, in real contact, real presence, real engagement with what actually matters to them, and time spent in the management of appearances, the performance of availability, the maintenance of dynamics that consume without nourishing. This sensitivity produces a new relationship with saying no, not the anxious, guilt-laden no of someone enforcing rules they are not sure they have the right to enforce. The quiet, clear almost immediate no of someone whose interior compass has developed enough sensitivity that it knows before the analysis, before the calculation of social consequences, whether a given commitment serves the life or depletes it. Trust that compass. It is becoming more accurate, not less. As the awakening progresses, The fifth sign is the one that most directly challenges the identity you have been living from. Your boundaries are beginning to emerge from a completely different place than any boundaries you have set before. Previous boundaries, when they existed at all, were set reactively, after the damage, after the pattern became undeniable, after the cost became too high to continue absorbing. They were the specific, painful, always slightly too late response of someone who finally reached a limit they had not known they were approaching. The boundaries emerging through the awakening are different in their origin. They arise not from accumulated damage, but from increasing self-care, knowledge. Not from what has already hurt you, but from the genuine, present tense recognition of what your life actually requires to sustain the consciousness you are developing. Not from fear of further harm, but from the specific grounded clarity of someone who understands what they are protecting and why it is worth protecting. This shift from reactive to proactive, from wound-based to self-knowledge-based, is one of the most significant markers of genuine awakening, because it means your relationship with your own worth has fundamentally changed. You are no longer waiting to be damaged enough before protecting yourself. You are protecting yourself from genuine self-knowledge of what you carry and what that carrying requires. This is not the same as becoming guarded. Guardedness is organized around fear. What is emerging in you is organized around clarity. And clarity, once genuinely developed, does not require fear to sustain it. Here is what the 5 signs, taken together, are accurate, truly pointing toward, not a new identity to adopt, not the spiritual label of empath as a framework for understanding your past or a category for organizing your future. Something more personal and more demanding than either of those things. The genuine, lived, daily inhabitation of what you actually are without the suppression that made you functional in environments not built for your level of perception, and without the wound-based self-abandonment that turned your capacity for deep feeling into a resource for everyone else's management. The awakening is not asking you to become more sensitive. Your sensitivity is already extraordinary. It is asking you to stop apologizing for it, to stop moderating it for the comfort of people who find it revealing, to stop treating your most essential characteristic as a liability requiring management rather than a gift requiring honoring. Here is what honoring it actually looks like in daily practice. It looks like trusting the body's signal B for the social override. When your nervous system communicates through the tightening, the restlessness, the specific somatic signal of a system registering something, receiving that communication as legitimate information rather than overriding it with the socially conditioned impulse to extend one more benefit of the doubt. It looks like protecting the solitude that your awakening consciousness requires, not occasionally, consistently, as the non-negotiable daily, entirely unapologetic practice of someone who has discovered that genuine interior contact is the source from which everything genuinely valuable they offer the world actually flows. It looks like allowing the boundaries to emerge from self-knowledge rather than waiting for them to be forced by accumulated damage. Every time you feel the early signal, the subtle wrongness, the slight energetic mismatch, the quiet interior knowing that something is not aligned, responding to the early signal rather than waiting for it to become a crisis. Here is your specific challenge for the next 7 days. Once each day, just once, without turning it into a project, practice the specific act of receiving your own perception without immediately qualifying it. Without the softening, the reframing, the generous alternative interpretation that your compassion automatically reaches for. Receive what your nervous system is actually communicating. Write it down, if that helps. Notice how often your first unqualified perception turns out to be accurate. You have been overriding an extraordinarily precise instrument with socially conditioned politeness for most of your life. 7 days of genuine reception, of actually listening to what your own system is telling you before the override will show you something, about the accuracy of that instrument that no amount of intellectual understanding about empathy can produce. Here is the final truth that your soul has been waiting for this entire script to deliver. The AWO. Keen is not something happening to you. It is something you are. The sensitivity was always present. The depth of perception was always there. The specific, extraordinary quality of consciousness that the 5 signs describe has been the truth of what you are for longer than you have had language for it. What is changing is not the nature. It is the relationship with the nature, the slow, non-linear, sometimes disorienting but genuinely irreversible movement from a life organized around suppressing what you are into a life organized around inhabiting it. That movement is the awakening, and it is already happening in you in the specific, personal, entirely individual way that genuine transformation always does. Not on anyone else's timeline, not according to anyone else's description of what it should look like. In you, as you, through the specific, irreplaceable, genuinely extraordinary consciousness that has been yours from the beginning. Stop suppressing it. Start inhabiting it. The world does not need a moderated version of what you carry. It needs the real thing. You are the real thing. Act accordingly.